All right, it's just me and you in the office today.
It's funny how that happens.
Yeah.
The other crew, like Andy and Martha, they get all crazy and they talk a lot, and they're all like DTLT today. We're gonna do this, and then what happens?
Yeah, Martha's on vacation, right?
She is on vacation, and she seemed to have gone to. We got a kind of some sort of tweet from her earlier today. I don't know if you could pull it up with
Where
an
did
image.
she go? Like,
We haven't got raised for 4 years, and we're going
Right.
to beaches with cat litter.
yeah,
So she brought her own cat litter. BY, what did you say?
BYOCL.
BYOCL to the beach.
Yeah.
Just in case, you can see the asphalt beneath. Cover it up.
Last week, Jerry Slazak was actually mentioning that we weren't following the back channel when we
Yeah.
were talking that much. I don't know if he was using the Justin TV chat, which he might have been, or using Twitter or something like that. But one of the things that I'm going to try
It
out
was
this
negative.
time, it was negative.
He was
Typical.
negative.
Yeah.
Typical is right.
Well, basically, this time, the way we're going to monitor the Twitter feed, and the way that we want you to
Yeah.
respond to what we're talking about is by tweeting at DTLT today. So
Test something.
yeah, so if you reply to at DTLT today, or you mention it anywhere in your tweet, it should not only should Jim be able to monitor it and tell me
Mm-hmm.
if people have questions or bring up some good points, but also it should pop up here on the video for everybody else to be able to see what you're saying.
That's right.
So you can totally test that now or later as we're talking, but that's at DTLT today. We're going to use Twitter as our back channel.
Yeah, and try that just because it's a cool thing that I think will be impressive.
Right.
So try it.
Definitely.
Experiment with that for us if you're watching. If you're not, your life's based on hate. You're going to suffer.
Yeah. We're doing a lot of experimentation. I mean, we're doing that. I'm playing around with the iPad.
That's right. Yeah,
As
show them what you're
switching.
doing with the iPad. I think
Yeah,
that's awesome.
we should at some point, I think, have an episode where we talk about all of this, how we use the green screen and how we're using iPads and MacBooks and all kinds of things.
Break down
to,
the TV setup.
yeah, like a meta episode,
Yeah.
where we talk about the background of what's going on. But
right.
basically, I'm using an iPad to do some of the camera switching. It's a application that lets you use keyboard shortcuts. You can make any button on here be a keyboard shortcut, and you can make your own layouts. So all I had to do to control the cameras was say, all right, when I press this button and it has this name, do this keyboard shortcut on the laptop that's all the way over there.
Yeah.
So,
So you can really do a remote camera switch.
yeah. Now, of
With
course,
that.
we only have one camera, but switching between those beach photos or any other shot
Exactly.
works.
You can switch between like the desktop presenter, and with one camera, you could have several shots.
Right.
You could have me and you. You could have just a close up. Well, no, you can't have just a close up of me, but you could have like we did. We had the blog in the background.
Right.
We maybe have another desktop that we're
We
pulling
could do
in.
a close-up of you,
I guess we could with a
Yeah.
separate shot.
a separate
right?
shot with you.
So you could do
So-
that all with one camera.
Yeah, we're playing around a lot on a hack together budget
Yeah.
of things that we can find in the office.
I'm
It's-
loving the whole TV
it's a lot of
stuff.
fun.
It's awesome.
It really
It's
is.
fun.
I asked on Twitter today. I said, "What should our topic be?" And Ben Rhymes actually posted back to
Yeah.
me.
The great Ben Ron.
The great Ben Rhymes is back on Twitter. If you didn't know that,
Welcome back, Ben.
yeah. So Tech Savvy Ed on Twitter, Ben. Basically, he pointed me to a link and said, you should talk about this. And the link was an MSNBC article. It was written and it talks about preventing Facebook student-teacher interaction. Apparently, in Missouri, a law has now been passed. And the headline of MSNBC basically says, you won't find teachers in Missouri friending their students on Facebook or any other social network for that matter this school year, not unless they want to violate a new law that prohibits such contacts.
Yeah.
So it's
As if teachers don't have enough laws that they're working with and that they need another one.
yeah. Well, and what's interesting about this, so a lot of the article was pulled from a blog post by a guy named Randy Turner, an educator in Missouri, I think in Joplin actually,
Okay.
is where he teaches. And so his blog post said a couple different good points, and I'll mention some of them here. It said, It was signed in spite of considerable evidence that social networking has been a positive force in education and little or no evidence to the contrary. And then it says the signing of Senate Bill 54, which is the name of it, continues the degrading of our profession, and the only effect it will have is on teachers who've always followed the law and who would never dream of violating the sacred trust we have to teach children. We will eliminate students and former students from our Facebook lists. So the frame of the law was to prevent sexual misconduct. That was the larger bill that was being passed, which of course, what politician is going to say, no, I don't want to.
I'm for,
I am for
child
sexual
molestation.
misconduct,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, come on.
Exactly. So clearly, a lot of senators in Missouri probably said, heck yeah, pass this thing without even knowing
Yeah,
the
do it for the
consequences of what was in it. But there's this small piece of it. So the name of the bill, in fact, the name of it is Senate Bill 54, but the name that they gave it in typical like 1984 fashion is the Amy Hester Student Protection Act, which Amy Hester was a student who was, misconducted. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
how do you
Was
appropriately
offended by,
say that? Right. Yeah. So, and a lot of people are calling this out as a bill that bans Facebook. But I mean, it's not limited to just Facebook, right?
Other
I mean,
social media. Right.
could be any sort of social network. The bill calls out like any website that's not work related.
Well, there's two things that immediately strike me. It's like, A, the way in which education and teachers are targeted. I mean, it's like constantly targeting education and teachers as kind of the stopgap of all societal problems. And this is not, and the fact is you're basically saying, teachers, they're going to be a link between the sexual abuse, which, if, as a teacher, wouldn't you be highly offended? To be like, the first group you're going to kind of look at as teachers. And obviously we know things happen between teachers and students.
Yeah.
I don't think nearly as much as people would want you to believe. And
Right.
I'd love to see some figures and some support of how many teachers are kind of sexually offending or any kind of, real issue there. I mean, like,
and there's
where
a-
do they back it up to say, like, this is something we got to turn into a law to basically, potentially, thwart any good that can come out of a relationship between a teacher and a student that is not limited to the traditional position of authority.
Well, and let's keep in mind that there are already laws in place that prevent these kinds of things.
Yeah, that's
So, these criminal background checks have been employed for much longer than that.
Exactly.
Suddenly this bill comes up, and this is what we're going to do to prevent sexual misconduct on children. And this is sort of seen as this stopgap measure. If we don't pass this, then, the whole school system is going to shit. And what are we going to do about
And
it?
what-
So,
Exactly. And what does it say about trust and faith in the people we hire?
right.
And I really think what Randy Turner gets at is the degradation of a profession.
Yeah.
And that's what we're looking at, however we want to frame it. Like, we're degrading to a profession, so it's a completely controlled space,
Yeah.
both for the student and for the teacher. It's not just one or the other. I mean, they're both losing out. And, the more and more you make it this controlled, Machiavellian state or whatever you want to call Orwellian space, the worse it becomes for everyone, and education becomes irrelevant, I think.
Right. Well, when I was reading about this, it actually brought to mind something that happened recently in Virginia, because we're battling this right now too. It's a hot topic, is social networks and educators trying to use them for educational purpose, and whether appropriate use would be the correct term, I guess. And this recently came up with the Virginia Board of Education. They were considering a set of guidelines, again, tied to sexual misconduct. It always comes back to that. Appropriate use goes back to sexual misconduct.
And it's like the most extreme example you
Exactly.
could give. But
Yeah.
like you said, what politician could vote against it?
Right, yeah, you're defining policy based on those extremes.
That's right.
And so,
We've seen a lot of that these days, haven't we?
Right.
Given the debt ceiling. I mean,
Yeah.
come on. We're in a completely dystopian society.
yeah. Well, I was happy in Virginia, VISTI, an organization that I'm with, was partnering with several other organizations, and we were able to go to the Board of Education, and back when they were drafting this policy, and I should say, was not a law, it was a set of guidelines for
Sure.
schools. Now,
Which is quite
unfortunately,
different.
they are quite different, but at the same time, you're saying these are going to be your guidelines by which you write your school policy. Well, school policy might as well be law for you. You're going to lose your job if you violate school policy.
That's right.
And the people writing that policy are looking to the Board of Education for these guidelines. So they were writing the guidelines.
Although losing your job and getting arrested are
They are
different.
separate things. Yeah, definitely. And I'll get back to that. But the Virginia Board of Education, they had written in there at one point about appropriate use of technology.
Yeah.
And it was very strongly worded, basically along these same lines, not
Yeah.
to use social networks for work-related use of any kind, not to use cell phones and text messages with students at all, period. Things of that nature. And VISTE partnered with several organizations to say, look, there are innovative things happening in school systems right now. You may not be aware of them. Let's show you a few about why that a
Yeah.
blanket policy like this is not a good idea. And so luckily, I say luckily, I mean, it was a combined effort that we eventually won out. And so I'm going to read to you what the new guidelines are for the prevention of sexual misconduct, the specific section of what it says. It says, digital technology and social networking provide multiple means for educators and other school board employees to communicate with students and personalize learning. Local policies should ensure that electronic and online communications between employees, volunteers, and individual students are transparent, accessible to supervisors and parents, and professional in content and tone. So that's, I think, where that professionalism comes back. And this idea of transparency I thought was really huge. This idea that, yes, you can use these alternative means if you're very open about it and say, look, if you want to be a part of this group, if you want to see the communication happening between me and my students, that's totally cool with me.
Well, look what Brian Jackson did up in Vancouver
Uh-huh.
with his students. He's a teacher, a high school's teacher up in Vancouver in high school, and he used Twitter and a radio station, DS106 Radio, to bring his students and their talents on into the open web as a way to showcase them, obviously with their approval. But to me, that was a remarkable kind of moment to see, like, yeah, this media is for that, personalizing learning, personalizing relationships, and bringing back the human element. George Siemens, who I'm a big fan of, does a lot of great stuff. He brought this up recently in a post that, you know, he's got the kind of social media ennui, right? He's done with Google Plus, he's done with Twitter, he's done with this, he's done with that, and you know, I understand that. I go through that regularly. But I mean, one of the things that's amazing to me about social media, however you want to frame it, and amazing to me that a bill like this or a law like this is really going to put in great jeopardy, is there is a place here for interstitial relationships beyond the intellectual kind of quotes and the large blog posts
Right.
and this kind of completely purely professional. I like the idea of the relationships we can't always define.
Yeah.
Right? That are playful, that are imaginative, that actually don't only predicate themselves on the study of a book or the thought. And I think these social media are really good at that.
Yeah.
And I think to kind of discount whether you like Facebook or not, or like Twitter or not, to discount them and discount that as somehow less than scholarly or less than intellectual really puts us as a community back into this kind of really unfortunate divide between this idea of play and what we do when we're not at school or when we're not being intellectual. And I think this social media, if it did anything cool, it kind of broke us out of some of those very strict dichotomies. And I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I think what's important, you know, when people write policies like this, one of their things is, well, there's alternatives to Facebook. If you want that interaction, we can sell your product. You know, I'm
Yeah.
sure, you know, as soon
That's
as
right.
something like this is written, the vendors come out of the woodworks and say, oh, you need a social network for your students to use that's safe?
Yeah.
I'd be happy to sell you one.
There's a million of them.
Yeah, and Randy Turner mentioned that in his blog post. That as soon as they passed this law, people said, well, if you want a social network, I can sell you a social network. But you're not going to sell the students on that. You're not going to make students use that or enjoy it.
You're just going to further denature the experience of education and of learning
Right.
from a process that I think is far more genuine and authentic. And
Yeah.
the more and more we litigate, how teachers teach, the more and more we define what SOLs or standards of learning, or however you want to say it, they need to meet on any given day or any given week, the more we kind of turn this process into a tailorized system. And that's why a law like this is very easy, because it takes the idea of education that we all understand, we all see is happening, takes this kind of process of mechanization of learning, and says, okay, not only that, but we're going to kind of root out any kind of outside influence that may complicate this.
Right.
Whether it be, because what's a complication? The complication is based in relationships.
Yeah.
And when you root out relationships like social media, you make everything simpler, more objectively working. And if you look into we have 33 seconds left, but look at that.
Oh, wow.
This is awesome. I hope this is on TV.
Yeah.
But, I mean, this is really cool. But that's 25 seconds. I don't know if anyone tweeted.
Yeah.
But look at the decorations.
Yeah.
This can be pretty cool.
Or if it doesn't show up in the recording, you're just going to look like you're high.
Yeah. Anyway, 13 seconds.
You know, I'll post these links on our page, and we're open to discussion. If you tweet with the link
Yeah.
to the blog post, it shows up as a comment.
That's right.
So that's something that you should know as well. I don't think we're done talking about this. I'm glad that Virginia is leading in that respect, but I'm not hopeful.
Yeah.
I think that in the long term that schools aren't going to still enable these kind of policies.
I think they're going to become more and more. And I mean, I think the love affair with the social web should just be starting.
Yeah.
But I think for too many people, and I understand why there's so much going on out there, this what do we do next? But I mean, this is the beginning of an era.
Yeah.
You know, and more institutions like schools, universities want to kind of, foreshorten it and get back to business as usual. And that's scary. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway.
Good call. All right, till next time.
Thank you.